Hello, all. I just wanted to talk about my book, maybe raise a little interest in it. If any of these stories I'm going to tell you about capture your fancy, maybe consider supporting an indie author and picking it up at Amazon. I've titled the collection While the Elephants Danced, based off of a sort of central short story in the collection. We open with a poem. The hint of light, here dimmed by rain, seen when the windstorm died, is shining through high window pane. It's been to me a guide, a hint as though a holy hymn, a harmony, a gleam, is woven through these stories grim, unplanned yet planned they seem. Hail, holy light from holy height, my heart eased by your sight. With tears I wrote, long through the night, but here's promised respite. Though mastery of this strange truth eludes my troubled brain, I followed you all through my youth, through all my joy and pain. But I remember what must come, the final mystery. So death's dark depths I'll slowly plumb, imagination's free. They make a prison out of life, who look not up nor down. Reason is sharper than a knife, but does not wear the crown. For love of light I must escape the fools who worship her. What they call love is no more than rape. To nothing they refer. Our first story is titled Narratio Neminis. I wrote it, I want to say 2022, 2021. I actually wrote it concurrently with another story that's also in this collection. It's titled A Tale Told in the Fog. Sort of bookends then on the whole collection. And I'll just read you the first page to give you a clue as to what the story's about. The old ruins rose from out the dark ivy, which is ever climbing its stony walls. How often had this forgotten fortress rebuffed marauders attempting just such a feat? Lifeless now, no hand stays the relentless march of time. There is a chapel there, and as the sun descends, this holy place becomes alive with an inviting glow, a heavenly light. Time seems devoid of meaning in that quiet hour before the restless night. But night does come upon that lonely hill, and the howls of wolves and of other nameless things will sound from out of the darkness. Even the seeliest of men might be excused for a case of nerves. We 3 hearty children, daring one another throughout the week, went up that hill without our mothers knowing on a Friday evening. With sleeping bags and torches and cans of food, and each of us laughing if the other seemed afraid, and all of us afraid, and none of us knowing why so many centuries ago that castle on the hill was left to the ivy and cruel march of time. We circled round the walls, I know not how long, before Sid called. He'd found a fissure in the wall under the vines where there was a hole just big enough for children like us to squeeze through. Throw the backpack in first, then in goes one leg, the rest of you following shortly after. The one bit of luck in our folly was that we made our berth in the old chapel. Luck or Providence. It just seemed the perfect place to camp. Of course, before the day truly ended, we all went off exploring. And that's the first page of Narratio Neminis. I hope to, how would I say it? There's a pattern. I think many artists of all stripes complain about this. The story that they write that they think is the really good one doesn't get the attention, and the story that they just kind of throw off there, easily written, just ideas came easily published. That's the one everybody likes, and I had a similar I have had a similar experience with this story. One of my friends just loved it, and I thought it was the lesser of the two that I had written that Halloween. However, everybody does seem to really enjoy it, period. The next story in the collection, From Salem. This one is very dear to me. I love zombie stories. I don't remember how many times in high school I read the Zombie Survival Guide. I know I loved World War Z as a book. And in all truth, the movie isn't horrible. I never really was much into the movies, though, but I like to just sit and think about zombies. Think about surviving zombie apocalypse, how you would work through a zombie apocalypse. Anyway, this story was actually originally a video game in my mind. I had a vague idea for a sort of roguelike zombie survival game where the map would change like a roguelike does, but your main goal was to go out, find food, and come back. And the overarching idea would be that there'd be less and less food every single time, but then there'd also be these little notes that if you had time, you could also collect those and slowly piece together the location of somebody else hiding in the zombie apocalypse. Anyway, that was the idea for the game. And as I thought about the game, the story developed more and more and more until the story took over everything. And I've actually written the story and never made the game. Anyway, here's the first page of From Salem. How can I tell you about the people of Amalis, Ursula K. Le Guin? How the sun burned that day upon my bare back, how the morning chilled, how piercing the breeze, how lost it all seemed. If there had been a child, I would have grabbed his hand and led him away with me into the western sky, a horizon filled with dark promise. There were no children in our camp to save, only sinners. I walked alone, surrounded by the sounds of death and fear, shouting in turmoil. Undressed and near naked, I walked away. There had come no music, and that was when I learned. I'd enjoyed, even loved the music. Us all starving and hungry, but a working radio, a broadcast, a family singing hymns from someplace far away. Not far enough. I first heard it on accident. We were foraging in the city. We had waited for the relative safety of noon, when the sun was highest and brightest. But back then, food was rarely left out in the open. You had to go into the dark places to look. And more often than not, the only food in the shadows was yourself. The 5 of us separated, and I walked the empty streets of the city. The rusted, weathered cars I passed were empty, save one. She watched me with that hateful expression they all have, malignant and desirous, her jaw moving itself up and down as if readying to bite me. The pale eyes followed me, and I felt a wrath building inside my chest, my heart like a war drum, willing me to battle. Overcome by my nature, I had tried to just walk on past her little red car. I repented, retraced my steps, and walked toward her. Anyway, that's the first page of From Salem. It's one I've really enjoyed writing. It's also one my sister said made her cry. So if you want to have a good cry with a zombie story, please consider picking up my collection here. On to the next story. Oops, too many pages. The Death of My Master. So, story behind this. I was at church, daydreaming, as I often do. I probably shouldn't do that as much as I do, but I do. And I got this strange, very visceral image of this vampiric creature with half a pair of wings, just one wing, sitting in the throne room, and he had just cast off this beautiful woman that he had killed, just sucked her blood and thrown her aside at his feet. And then there was this knight bearing an axe, and he walks in, and he's going to kill this monster. And they fight, and it was a cool fight scene all in my head. It just kind of all came in a flash, this image. So I tried to write it. I don't know if I quite captured what I saw in my mind, but I still think I captured something worthwhile here. As another note, I didn't intend to write it in the form that I did, which is I wrote it as a poem. It just so happened that a poem is what happened when I started to write. The Death of My Master. My master was a most unhappy man, who all of fortune's wheel went sundry times, till fate here lays him at the lowest spoke. By tortures he is brought unto his death. His spirit sundered, and his heart is broke. Anon, I'll follow him after these rhymes, but nay, I shall not speak what many can. Common his history is known to all, who knows not that his family fought our prince, but he chose state over his very blood. His monarch bid him cause his kinsman's death. But, lost within the battle's swelling flood, I know my lord compassion did convince to hide his brother in his private hall. This secret, kept till now, I'll whisper here, that his divided love cost him true love. For kinsman slain was dowry ere he wed. The princess cost was his own brother's death. The common tale was that the rebel fled, but these old things I dare not speak more of. It's recent stories you all wish to hear. Anyway, those are the opening 3 stanzas, the first page of Death of My Master. If you can handle poetry, if you're not a wimp, I would suggest you enjoy this story and buy it, and tell everybody else in the world to buy it so I can become a millionaire and spend my days writing poetry. Let's go to the next story. The Music Box. This one is based off of a recurring nightmare I had when I was very young. It frightened me, and I had it over and over again. Anyway, so I thought, why not share that horror and terror with everybody else? Although I don't think it's frightful in the sense of like a slasher movie discussing it. It was frightful in that kind of eerie, wordless way that you can't ever really express. The Music Box. Not by that door, he said gently. That door leads to hell. G.K. Chesterton, The Hammer of God. I am, or was, what am I now? I used to, in the dull interims between study and lecture, when the haunting spectre of ennui would fall on me with its full weight. I used to wander off about various streets and shops in search of... I suppose in the end I was in search of the box, though I didn't know it at the time. Yet, if not that, what else have I found? I could not name then that painful, that otherworldly longing which ruled my soul as though the strain of a dirge had been woven into the symphony of my life. What did I mind the particles, which had once enchanted me? The building blocks of matter, of reality itself. Dust! Meaningless! Empty! The fervor in which I had begun my dissertation. Blech, I can't talk. Begun my dissertation had waned, day by day, in such subtle subtractions that I cannot describe when exactly my passion became wholly absent. The listless hours I spent at my desk pretending to write, I would still at times mount a defense of my defense at my silent roommate, whose unsettling stare would settle itself on me with a most worrying expression. We had been friends once. Has had my dissertation. All the weeks and months of our incarceration slowly churned every gesture, every smell, every peculiarity of speech into an insufferable insipidity. If he had only hated me, as I had grown in that last year to hate him, I would not be here. Anyway, that's the music box, the first page. I hope that hooks you. If you're enjoying it, maybe consider buying my book and reading all my short stories and, making me money, because I'd like to make some money off my writing so I don't have to work and then write. I can just write as my work. That'd be really great. Anyway, The Judgement is the next story. Now, this is one that surprises me because I basically wrote this in an hour. It was just a short little idea I had, and I liked it. Kind of hid it away till I had a right place for it, which was here. And a lot of people have told me, yeah, this is my favorite one in the collection. Out of the maybe 4 or 5 people I think I've gotten to read my book for me, friends, and you know what. Anyway, you should come buy my book and read this one because it will be your favorite, even though I put hardly any effort into it. It just kind of flowed out of me suddenly one night. The Judgement. I found him at the bar. He was holding a half-finished glass of whiskey against his head and staring at the variety of bottles decorating the shelves of liquor. There was a mirror behind him. There was a mirror. Let me try this sentence again. There was a mirror. There was a mirror hidden behind this panoply of spirits, doubling, as it were, the already bountiful display. I sat down beside him. He didn't stir. "Fred," I said, tapping his shoulder. He nearly jumped out of his suit, but when he saw me, he sighed, setting the glass down on the bar. Mike, it's you." "Where were you?" I asked. He stared at me through befogged glasses. "The reception," I added. "You bugged out of there like the devil was after you." He shot a glance over his shoulder. "He was. Something. I'm sure you do. But like most of your students, I'm in the dark. You're going to have to talk like a human being if you want to be understood." He stuttered. They read the will yesterday." "I know. We were both in it." "His paintings," he sputtered. "Yeah, he left me a stretch of seaside, valued at $10,000. Don't think I'll sell it. I can't. When I look into it, it's... He had a rare talent," Fred said. "I know the one. Ere the storm, he called it. The lighthouse in the corner, the beach, and that's the end of the first page of The Judgement. Like I said, a lot of people have told me this is their favorite, and if that opening hooked you, maybe consider buying my book. Let's see, our next story. Input, Output. Yes, this is the one that I think will get me in trouble. I want to try to be, what should I say? I want to get in front of it. I am, very right-leaning. I try to find somebody who's more right-leaning than me and then become more right-leaning than him. That's my general political goal in life, just to become the most right-wing nut job I can be, just to make women upset with me, because I really enjoy it when people and clutch their pearls. So that's just my personal goal in life, to be a terrible person. Anyway, so this is the one spot in my collection where I get a little bit political. If you don't like that, you should buy my books so you can prove how much you hate me by burning my book. In fact, you can buy as many copies as you want to burn them. I don't care. I'm still getting money that way. Input, output. He was lounging in his cell, the steel fetters little affecting his comfort. His hands were clasped behind his head in lieu of a pillow, and he was reclined upon his cot, a wistful grin splayed across his face. "Simon Scott?" I asked. He laughed. "Do you remember me?" I continued. With a sigh, he pulled his eyes away from the ceiling and looked me over. He said, raising an eyebrow. It was after your trial," I said. "Trial?" he asked. "A few years ago, when you shot the two—" "Oh, yes," he said, and sat up. "I remember. You know, I really took what you said to heart." "Oh?" I sputtered stupidly. "Yes." Sitting up, his manacled hands were now resting between one still and one bouncing knee, and the chains tinkled lightly like bells. "You said I shouldn't have shot them, remember?" I nodded. "And I asked why, and you said because they were black." "They were underprivileged. They just needed money," I began. "They were," he continued, "the victims of circumstance. Of course the one they were pointing the guns at, well, that's beside the point. The point you made so eloquently was that they didn't have a choice. They were innocent." Anyway, that's my little political thriller right here. It's fairly short, 3 pages, and if you don't want to read it, you can always just skip that one. There's still 14 good stories that aren't political in the rest of the collection. All right. The next story is The End of the World. Now, this one actually appeared on my blog. However, this is somewhat more polished. I had to put it in here because when I was correlating, is that the word? When I was putting all these stories together, there was this pattern that developed, and I realized that this and another story kind of helped to complete the pattern that I was trying to make. So, I put it into my book. I've also polished it up a little bit, so it's not exactly the same as what you'll find on my blog. The End of the World. Let us set the scene. The sun is low, but it has been low many hours now. And that dim glow on the horizon, changeless, growing neither darker nor brighter, casts its mellow light upon the world, never rising fully into a new day, nor finally falling into sweet night. It is the place of eternal twilight. And if you have seen the creatures trapped in amber at museums and have any sympathy for them, imagine that. A world encased, preserved, and dead. A shadow is one of many shadows there, the only shadow of organic shape. It is not the jutting shadow of the ragged and barren cliffs. The shadow of a man, squat, sitting upon a weathered stone, his face turned away from us, is staring out at a glistening but untroubled sea. For the present, he is only a silhouette, but let us use our ears now and listen, as he is listening. He hears the footsteps, a familiar sound after all this time. Those footsteps have followed in his shadow for eons, and with a sigh, he breaks his long tradition. He does not run. I warned you not to come. He waits. The footsteps grow closer. A hand grabs his shoulder. A voice, one he has not heard in a long time. "You're coming with me," it said, and the hand, not pulling or turning, the captive simply squeezed tight as possible, lest the quarry should somehow wiggle out of its grasp once more, and the eternal chase begin again. And wasting no time, the hunter called upon the city Hillel, the great prince, called upon its golden light to shine down and draw them back home. The lightning flashes by which he entered and exited time were a matter of course for him, but this time no. And that's where the first page of The End of the World ends. Anyway, this one was also based off of a dream I had. It was an interesting dream. I dreamed that myself and this is like, I think back in high school or middle school, myself and all my classmates were like brought out of time into this world of many different, kind of like a port where you could go into a bunch of different worlds. And we were all going to be inaugurated and become one of the people here at this sort of port world. Anyway, I had this sense that there was something very wrong with what was going on. And so I broke away from the group and ran towards the nearest portal and just jumped in. And then I had all these weird dreams of exploring all these strange different worlds. Anyway, so this is sort of based on that, sort of like afterwards, when I was awake, trying to think how would that story end. This is sort of based on that, just the idea of how I would end that story that I haven't told you. That was just a dream of mine. Okay, we have the titular story, the one that gives the whole collection its name. While the Elephants Danced. "You are very beautiful," sighed the clown, turning his powdered face from the mirror. Robert W. Chambers, The King in Yellow. Mr. Black had sable hair and a perfect mustache I have always wanted to pull. It was a perfect name, too, though there was a certain contrast between it and his face. His face was quite white, strikingly white. The proverbial phrase, "pale as death," comes readily to the tongue, far too readily, and mine is the only face to match his. Strange as it sounds, he'd come by that illimitably simple yet perfect surname in the usual accident of birth, quite unlike his kindred who reinvent themselves with some stage name when they finally come under the lights. Mr. Black had a perfect name for his trade, the soft simplicity of which stood out forcibly in that menagerie of outstanding ostentation, as everyone around him piled up his own Babel's tower of titles and epithets that might somehow outpromise his peers, like trees fighting for the sun. Mr. Black's shady name grew as a spreading whisper under that dark canopy. Lights! Here's Mr. Black in the center of the ring, the traditional top hat, wand, and two-tailed monkey suit. At the announcement of his name, the crowds have grown quiet. "I shall need a volunteer from the audience," I whisper as his voice booms. I've watched the show too many times now, and that is the end of the first page. Anyway, I really enjoyed writing this one, and I realized something when I did. There was no way I would ever find anyone to publish this. It is an incredibly Christian story, while also being full of sex, nudity, cross-dressing, violence, murder, and things that no Christian would want to publish. And it sort of feels a little bit like me. I very much believe in Christianity. I go to church, read the Bible, but I very much, I get a little bit of a look askance at. Why are you writing all these horror stories? Why are you writing things with damsels in distress getting their heads chopped off and all that stuff? Well, I like to do it, and it's the stories that come to me. I don't choose them. Anyway, sort of as I was writing, I kept thinking in my head, or the idea kept coming to me. I kept remembering the quote from the Bible, the stone which the builders rejected had become the chief cornerstone. And so I decided, that this would then be my sort of central story for the whole collection. Anyway, I hope that intrigues you. Maybe pick up my book and read the collection and see what you think. Let's see here. The next story, I believe this is the shortest story in the collection. It also appeared on my blog. It's called Escape to the Stars. And if I read the first page, I will have read, I think, more than half of the story to you, because it is really just 1.5 pages long. So I'm just going to read half of the first page. Escape to the Stars. I've run from you throughout ages and times uncounted. How you've persisted. You've found the edge of the world now, and there's no place more to flee. His eyes are the unchanged eyes I've always known. In whatever form he takes, whatever color they change to, they're so cold, like touching steel on a winter's morning, and that telltale glint of sickly yellow that he can never quite get rid of. In his passions, always yellow. And like now, in this uninhibited wasteland with no one to fool, a blazing, bleeding yellow. His bloody tears fall unstopped, red life bound in viscous walls of sallow pus. How they sizzle in the snow. Anyway, yeah. If you want to read the sort of rough draft, the one I just wrote for my blog and put up there, you can find that on my blog. And if you think that's a good short story, you can read a more polished version in my book and find 14 other really great short stories. Anyway, our next short story in the collection, Ships in the Night. She knocked on my door. I saw her distorted image through the fish-eyed peephole. The door opened. "He's dead," she said, her foot tapping. I nod. "How?" She sighed and walked in. I watched as her eyes scanned my living room for an ashtray. She was clutching her purse, her nearly spent cigarette pinched tightly in her other hand. The smoke assaulted my nose. When she didn't answer, I sought my cupboards for a saucer. Getting her to sit down, I laid the saucer on the coffee table beside her and asked again, "How did he die?" She put out the orange stub, squashing it into my china, and, clinging to her purse like a teddy bear, glanced out the window. "Have you ever wanted to be free?" she asked. "Free to do what?" "No," she said. "You don't understand. I mean free, just free." I laughed. "There's no just free. Everything has a price, and you're only free if you're free to pay it." She was lighting another cigarette. "How did he die?" I asked again. "How did your wife die?" she returned. "I still hope," I grinned, "that someday she'll return to me." "Don't lie to me." And that's the first page of Ships in the Night. Kind of a little short, a vignette, noir style short story about as Mr. Leach, a teacher who taught us. He ran in high school. He had a film and culture class. He described noir films as bad people doing bad things for bad reasons. If you like that kind of thing, this is hopefully kind of scratches that itch. I rather enjoy the story. Our next story in the collection is The Pornographer. I've had at least one person say this is one of his favorites in the collection. This one was very hard to write. It took me a while. It wasn't supposed to be a short story at all. It was, when I started it, I was just, what's the word I'm looking for? I was just doing a sort of self-imposed writing exercise. So this first paragraph was just a little exercise I was doing, and then I was like, I wonder where else this would go. And so I just kept writing and writing. It took months because I wasn't ever focused on it. Just kind of, here's another idea for it. And then just kind of little bit by little bit finally put the whole story together. I hope I've polished the mess up now, but it seems to be seems people enjoy it. The Pornographer. The moss clung to the cold stony wall, sprouting here and there from certain crannies in patches of deep green. A flight of ancient stairs led up to a fallen story. At the final step, a lonely archway held the rising sun within a gossamer veil. A dewy web spun by some spiders stretched across that doorless doorway, capturing the daylight in its rainbowed silk. The early morning chill was pleasant upon my bare arms, and the air felt clean as I walked amid the ruins of this castle. Not a castle, as I remember. Not a real castle. It was once a monastery, though, a place of contemplation and prayer. Now, only nature worshiped God here, and the members of the old brotherhood lay sleeping within the winding crypt below. I walked over to one of my cameras and, crouching down beside it, began flipping through the reapings of the night. The motion sensor had gained me a wide and varied collection of blurry shots of moths and their insect eyes at times glowing with that pale green aura of the night vision lens. Nothing useful, I feared, as I neared the end of the slides. Then I stopped, blankly staring at the little display in my hands. The sensor had gone off, but I couldn't see what had triggered it. The camera had taken a photograph of nothing that I could see. I gazed at the screen, studying every pixel. I couldn't find anything. There were 2 more shots just like it, and then some more moths. In all, it was 90% moths, a few shots of possums and other nocturnal animals, and those 3 mysteries. Anyway, that's the opening page of that short story. I think it's this one's almost a meditation. I wrote it very slowly, scene by scene, just kind of letting it come. And it is a bit about kind of grief and loss, and hopefully it's about redemption and forgiveness too. So if that interests you, please pick up my short story collection and give it a read. Let's see here. This one's fortunately kind of one of the longer ones. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. No business dying. Kol Shabbat Havel. All that is coming is vanity. Alright, let's see here. So this short story, I think I wrote it originally for some sort of writing contest where they give you sort of your choice of prompts, where they say, here are three categories, and there's so many things in each category, and you have to get something from each category and then write a short story about it. Anyway, it was a fun little thing I signed up for once, and I thought this story came out really well. A businessman. He knew the value of time, of his time. And ever the businessman, he had no time for the doctor's comforts. Indeed, when the young medical professional had come in with his clipboard ready to give the news in slow, reassuringly scientific terms, he had in his armament long, flowing Latin words that would glide over the all too blunt fact of the inoperable nature of the tumor, and on a few subtle Greek phrases to smooth out the far too angular concept of, well, to use the good, strong Anglo-Saxon term that the doctor wished to avoid, death. But the businessman, long used to such tricks when the quarterly reports were not what they should be, did what he always did in such situations. Bottom line, doctor. The doctor dropped the pretense of a smile, and with a sad nod looked down at his clipboard, though there was nothing more written there for him to learn. The brief consultation was more of an escape from the businessman's sharp glare, done in much the same spirit that many a young entrepreneur in the midst of some high-stakes proposal had temporarily stepped out of a meeting to stand before the bathroom mirror in an abject and broken silence. He looked up again at his patient. Not that old, early 50s, but could pass for his 40s, a round face, a shaved head. Really, The only signs of age were the strong prescriptions he wore. Whether or not those lenses helped him to see, the doctor could. And that's the end of the first page. Anyway, it's another story, hopefully about redemption, and repentance. Very, as you read it, you might notice it's heavily. It's sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's in the vein of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Eventually, like a very shortened, truncated version of that story. That's, of course, a better story than anything I've ever written. I mean, that's just a work of genius. You should. I mean, the movies are great too, but you should read that story. Go buy a copy of A Christmas Carol, and then every December you need to sit down and read it. I like to try to do the staves of the book on the days of Christmas. Anyway, that's just a command. You don't really have a choice. You have to do that, but you get to read my book if you want to buy it. Anyway, the next story in our collection, another poem, a long-form poem, Poison in the Telling. Now, this one, as I say of others, this one was based on a dream, but it's not exactly just a dream. I was lucid dreaming at this point, and I had a weird conversation with the snake in my dream. And I've kind of put this all together of what the snake told me in my dream and what I talked to the snake about and all this stuff. It was a weird dream. Anyway, Poison in the Telling. Once upon a time, a traveler met a snake curled up between the rocks. While I was on a journey long, so far from any home I knew, lost on a turn I feared was wrong, and too afraid to fear, fear grew. And speaking plain, I was on the run, but not for something I had done. A man must run when he is young, for his a tale that's yet unsung. I feared, for 'twas a rocky path. I knew not what would come to pass, for at the crossroads was a sign, a skull and crossbones pointing high. Yet all roads always end in death. This sign most honest pointed left, and up into the mountain range. I thought perhaps to face that pain, and I had struggled in my march, so hungry worn my lips were parched. I'll finish the stanza. We're going into the second page. I'm so generous with you guys. I'll back up, though. I'll read the whole stanza together. And I had struggled in my march, so hungry worn my lips were parched, when I did spy a crystal pool, sweet-scented breeze, my hot flesh cooled. Anyway, I really liked how this came out. If I could, I wish I could get people to read poetry more. And I like to think that this poem, what's the word I'm looking for? I like to think that you could read this poem as if it was just a short story. Like you don't have to read it as poetry. That's what I was going for. Anyway, yeah. Let's get to the next short story. The Last Thing I Stole. Now, this isn't really a short story. This is a novella I've hidden as a short story. I think it's over 10,000 words long. It's the longest thing in this book, but it's heartfelt. I hope you could call it meandering, but that's a thematic aspect of the story. I'm trying to. It's told in a bunch of journal entries from someone who doesn't want to write, but his priest has told him that he needs to write down the things that he did. So anyway, it's also kind of on a meta level. It's about me. It's a little bit about me. Kind of, I hated writing as a kid. I hated reading as a kid, and slowly, my teachers, my parents, the adults in my life, made me learn to read. And made me love reading, made me learn to write, made me love writing, and that's what I want to try to capture in this story, this transition between somebody who only uses words and then becomes somebody who loves, and that's it, someone who loves. The Last Thing I Stole. March 18th, 1900, something. Before the war, I was a thief. I was one afterwards, too. During the war, I stole quite a bit and worse things, but that was for my country. The priest says I don't need to repent of what I did in Europe and what I did in the tower. He probably knows better than me, but it isn't what I stole that keeps me up at night. Well, there's one thing I stole, which does. March 21st, 19 something something. Okay, this journal. I hate it. That's all I can write. I hate writing. Just write, he says. Just write. What should I write? Wants me to write about it, doesn't he? Well, he knows everything already anyway. I had to find someone. I needed help. And that seal of the confessional trick. I don't want anyone to know. I wasn't supposed to be a thief. When I think back, I had a good upbringing. We weren't hard up. We lived in a nice neighborhood. I was an only child, got most of a good education before. And those are the 2 entries on page 1. If that interests you, please buy my book and read my little hidden novella within my short story collection, The Last Thing I Stole. And we are now coming to the final short story in the collection, if I can get to it. Oh, there we go, just passed it. A few pages back now. A Tale Told in the Fog. This one, I think I mentioned earlier, I wrote it with Narratio Neminis. Narratio Neminis. I know Latin. I'm learning Latin. I'll get it better. Anyway, A Tale Told in the Fog. I really enjoyed writing this one. I enjoyed the characters, and then everybody preferred Narratio Neminis. Anyway, I did get... This one will be also published in, I believe, Unreal Press's Volume 7. So that should come out at the end of June here. The end of July here. I know what month I'm into. I really do. So let's see here. Lad, people like you ought not to lie. You blush, you turn away, your hands tremble. You would do better, I think, to tell an old man your story, for there is one thing worse than lying, which is being caught in a lie. To hell with you, he said with a snarl, though his face softened after this malediction, and it was followed up by an embarrassed chuckle and a sort of smile. He gazed out at the fog hanging over the harbor in a distracted silence. I didn't speak to him. I knew he was making up his mind. He shivered once and then turned back to me. I'm not lying. I don't know the man, not anymore. So you know the man? Well, and I only know half a told tale to recount. Blech. And I have only half... I can't talk. And I have only... I will do this. And I only have... Well, and I only have a half-told tale to recount, and that is mostly of a ship. I've only heard a few whispers about her captain. He was once a man and a friend. There was a long sigh, and he met my gaze with an unwavering stare. Even at one time, he gave a mirthless laugh and added, a very long time ago, a child. Believe it or not, that shadow you mentioned was once a baby at his mother's teat. Forgive me, I don't mean to lie. When I hear folks speaking of him, when they never knew him, and even if, as I fear, these dreadful tales are true, well, it's hard to think that my fellow playmate has made such a mark in history, has become a fable. It's hard to think the monster and the boy are one and the same. Many a man, I nodded, has put the child to shame. He rubbed his hands against the cold, then shoved them into his pockets. And that is A Tale Told in the Fog, the concluding story to my collection. If any of these stories have any interest for you, please consider buying my book and supporting an indie author and making me smile, because I'll be happy when my book sells. And then we have this closing poem. I die to self, and spread my wings above the pits of hell. The rising fear my soul soon brings unto the stars to dwell. The ashes circle around the drain of past and future dreams, but I stand free after the rain and broken sunlight beams. I think I've captured some aspect revealed within this light. Each flash contains, though imperfect, a part of the whole sight. But since I am a mortal man, and like all men must die, I must accept that the whole plan is hidden from my eye. Hear not a flash the coming dawn, the dark of night is gone, the fierce storm came, but now moves on. To morning's light I'm drawn, reflecting on the way I've come, on all my sad regrets, yet hopeful that the final sum a better future sets. So where I start it, here I'll end. I'll rest now in the light. This plan of years I won't forfend. I hope I wrote it right. Thank you for listening to my little advertisement here for my book. I hope you all have a nice day. God bless. Toodaloo.